we talked about heaven and hell, right? So now the next question, the next question in this line of thought is, how do we get to heaven and hell, right? So we have determined that there are these two outcomes for me when I die, when my soul, by the way, is immortal. So now I need to know how to get to heaven, hopefully, yeah? And what we're going to talk about in the next hour or so is basically, down to the bone, is just the need for a guide. We need a guide to take us to heaven, yes? We all need guides. Life is a hard game to play. You would agree, right? We all could use some help, always, yeah? Even someone who was very important in the Middle Ages. I don't know if you recognize these drawings. This is a poet, Italian poet from Florence. It's Dante. Dante Alighieri. Dante Alighieri. These are two drawings by a painter called Gustave Doré in the 19th century. Look how beautiful it is. And if you know anything about Dante, Dante was the major poet of the Italian letters, you know, genius, absolute genius of Western literature. Just like Goethe in German, right? Cervantes, and I don't know the Swedish equivalent, but someone must be the Swedish equivalent also, right? He wrote exactly. He wrote a very, very famous book that is called The Comedy. Actually, Divina is an epithet that Boccaccio, another author, gave to the book because he thought it was fantastic, it was divine, yeah? So he gave it the Divine Comedy. And the comedy it's not a comedy because it's funny, yes? It's a comedy because it's not a tragedy. That's the point, okay? In ancient Greece, you had tragedies that ended with death, horrible endings, or comedies that ended well. And this is a comedy because it ends well, yeah? It has three parts. It has the Inferno, okay, the Purgatorio, and the Paradise. Now, here we have the beginning of Inferno. This is the first chant, yeah? And these are some of the most famous verses in Western literature, yeah? Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita mi ritrovai per una selva oscura che la via via smarrita, blah, 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 blah. So Dante, in the beginning, finds himself in a dark forest. He doesn't know where to go, and he's lost. And this is why I'm saying that we all need guidance. Yeah? We can all be Dante sometimes inside of this forest. But not everything is lost for Dante, yeah? Because he meets someone. Have you read the comedy? Has any of you read the comedy? No? Okay, there is... Sorry?
I don't like that kind of poems.
Yeah, very long poems. But the thing here is that he finds a guide. He finds a guide. And that guide is Virgil. You know who Virgil was? Virgil is one of the three major Latin poets. So we're talking about 2,000 years ago, a little bit more than 2,000 years ago. Vergilius, exactly. Vergilius. Vergilius becomes the guide for Dante, yeah? And Vergilius, he is very important because he wrote the Aeneid, yeah? Even if you know it. What is Vergilius? Vergilius is a poet, yeah? Vergilius is a poet. So why does Dante choose Virgil as his guide to go through Inferno, through hell? Yeah? Why do you think that he chooses a poet? Because Dante is a poet, and what he loves most is poetry. Yeah? That may be one of the answers. Yeah? Second of all, also, it's because Virgil has already been to hell. Because if you read the Aeneid, Aeneas, one mythological character, Virgil writes that he goes through hell. So he knows the way. Okay? That is what Dante chooses. Okay? Dante is lost. We are all lost. Sometimes, my point is that we need a guide, and this guide has to be someone special, someone that we may love, and that has been through the horrors that we're about to overcome. Yeah? And we go to the topic of this lecture then. Where is the guidance in the Bible? Yeah? In the early Bible, let's say. So these are all the books of the Bible, and we dedicated one lecture to the book of Genesis. So here we have the beginning, yeah? And we also, we dedicated a lecture to this one, and today we're going to talk about these books here, Wisdom and Poetry, yeah? Because you can imagine that wisdom, in order for someone to guide us, yes, this someone has to be wise, yeah? And so these are the books we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job, yeah? And then in the next lecture, I'm going to talk about the rest of the books here, the history and the major prophets, yeah? So the key point here is that we need a guide. We're going to study what these books tell us that we have to do in order to go to heaven, yeah? The legend goes that these books were written by a king called Solomon. Yeah? Solomon is a legendary king. Of course, this is just legend, yeah? But you know the main anecdote by Solomon. Have you ever heard this? Solomon was a very wise king, yeah? And there is a chapter in the Bible where two women approach the king, yeah? And these two women, they have a newborn baby that is alive, another one that is dead, yeah? And both moms, they claim that the baby that is alive is theirs, yeah? So they are fighting for the baby. They say, no, it's my baby, no, it's my baby. So how do you know who's the real mother? So Solomon, in all his wisdom, he says, okay, no problem. We're just going to split the baby in half. And each mother gets to keep half. Yeah? And then what happens? One of them, the one that is not the real mother, she says, okay, we can do it. But the real mother, she says, no, please, no, just give it. Don't do that to my baby. Just give it to the other woman. Yeah? And then he knows who is the real mother. Yeah? So this is supposedly the guy that wrote these stories. I mean, this is just legend. I have read a little bit, and the historicity of Solomon, yeah, maybe he existed actually, but 1,000 years before Christ. So we're talking about very, very old times. Yeah. So right, we're going to try to apply Solomon's wisdom and to try to find our way through life, and hopefully into heaven, yes? And so we go to the first act here, the book of Proverbs. What is the book of Proverbs? The book of Proverbs is a book that was written over hundreds of years, a very long time span, or even thousands. And they contain what I call, these social media one-liners that says that they consider that they have absolute wisdom. It's like, always look for yourself, or never stop traveling, or stuff like that. These are called aphorisms. Yeah? Aphorisms. Aphorisms are sentences that supposedly contain teachings for life. Yeah? And so the book of Proverbs has many of these sentences. And what they're trying to tell us is, well, trying to warn us of what is dangerous and trying to tell us, do this because it's good, yeah? So here I have some examples. And this one says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. So the main point of the book of Proverbs is that you should, quote unquote, fear the Lord. Yeah? Fear the Lord. This is what they tell you all the time. Just fear the Lord, fear the Lord. And what this means, basically, is that you should have a respect for God and obey his laws and obey whatever he handed down to Moses in the 10 Commandments, right? So don't forget that the Lord is there watching over you, and he's going to punish you if you do something wrong. Yeah, but he's also gonna be good to you. And so, for example, more of these sentences that I told you about. Another one, for example, here: whoever robs their father and drives out their mother is a child who brings shame and disgrace. Okay, You see? Stuff that you shouldn't do. Yeah? Stuff that you shouldn't do. And then another one, for example, it says, the prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer from it. The supposed, I cannot help but criticize all of these aphorisms, because aphorisms, instead of having just wisdom, I think they are very circumstantial. Yeah, they could apply to you, but not to you, and they could apply to me in a given time of the year, but not another one. Yeah, so aphorisms, for example, let me give you one aphorism that, for example, could be in the book of Proverbs. A picture is worth more than 1,000 words. Yeah? This is a common saying. Yeah? But at the same time, we also say the plume is mightier than the sword. Yeah? So words are mightier than weapons, yeah, sometimes. So which one is it? Which one is the truth? Is a picture worth more than 1,000 words, but at the same time, words are more powerful than weapons? You see how, I mean, these aphorisms, this wisdom, yeah, is very circumstantial. And what I would have liked to write here in the book of Proverbs, this is my wisdom, is that as human beings, we're limited and we're imperfect and we make mistakes. And the only aphorism that I would have written in the book of Proverbs is that you are entitled to make a mistake every now and then because you're human. I think that applies to everyone. Yeah. But I mean, if you open the Bible, you will see hundreds of these. Yeah? Hundreds of these. But yeah, I mean, some people are guided by this. But what is also very interesting in this book is that in some of these aphorisms, there starts to appear a figure that we didn't know of. If you read the book of Genesis, okay, if you read the book of Genesis, the creation of the world, you will see that God creates the world alone. Yeah, He doesn't need any help, and He just creates the world in 7 days, right? But actually, when you go inside of the book of Proverbs, you start finding contradictions. And so, for example, you find this woman that talks here. I have just extracted this from the book of Proverbs, and she says, "The Lord possessed me in the beginning of His way, before His works of old." So there's someone there next to God, apparently. What else does she say? She says, "I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was." So she is also some sort of immortal being there. What else does she say? When there were no depths. Now remember that in the first lines of Genesis, God says, well, the Bible says that in the beginning there are depths. Yeah, there is an ocean. Yeah, so this woman is talking now. She's saying, when there were no depths, so even before the start of time, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains abounding with water. Now, what is this? What is this? How can this be? What else does she say? She says, "Then I was by Him, by God, as one brought up with Him. And I was daily His delight, rejoicing always before Him." Here you have the quote. Who is this woman? What a surprise, actually. Who is this woman? Now, this woman is known as, well, I think actually in the Bible she's called Wisdom. She's called Lady Wisdom. And in Greek, she's known as Sophia. This is wisdom. This is wisdom. And it's almost as if, the authors of these verses, they wanted to tell us that God, He didn't make up the world out of will. No, it's out of nowhere. He was wise. He knew how to do it. And actually, if you if you read the first sentences of Genesis, no, he says, in the beginning, God created heaven and the earth. And when we analyze the book of Genesis, we ask, how did he create it? And then John 1:1 has the answer here. He says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So God spoke the world. Yeah? This is how he created the world. And what is speech but just thought that materializes in voice? Yes? In voice. It's your thought, it's your own thought. Yeah? So who is this lady? I said that she's called Lady Wisdom. For the Greeks, it's Sophia. This is why we have the word philosophy. Yeah? Philos, I love Sophia. Yeah?
What is it, philosophy?
Philosophy. Yeah?
What is philosophy?
Philos is to love. To love. Sophos, Sophia, the knowledge. So the philosophers, as Socrates would say, are the ones that love philosophy, love knowledge. Yeah? And so you can imagine how, if I tell you that the book of Proverbs may have had some Hellenistic influence, yeah? We see Sophia, we see the figure of Sophia around many, many different works. And for example, I have taken this picture here. She always appears as a woman to the troubled philosopher. And this is a picture, for example, of Boethius. He was a philosopher in the beginning of the Middle Ages in Rome. Yeah, so Rome had already fallen. And this guy, Boethius, he was a man of his word. He was a good politician, and he was condemned to death for doing his job. Yeah? So he was wrongfully condemned to death, and he wrote his Consolations of Philosophy inside of his cell. And inside of his cell, it's a very stoic work, yeah. And in the beginning, he says that he is being visited by Lady Philosophy, yeah, Sophia also, and she's a beautiful woman with white clothes. And so we see how the authors of the Bible somehow wanted to let us know that God was inspired by wisdom when He created the world. And so these verses that I showed you before are an addition to the book of Genesis that not too many people know of. Yeah, not too many. I'm sure not too many people know of these verses. Yeah, and when you actually read the Bible, you start comprehending all of this. Yeah.
So can I ask?
Yeah.
What was I didn't get why was she a she?
Why is she a she?
Yeah.
That's a very interesting question. I will try to answer it at the end of the lecture. But that's a very interesting. Why is God inspired by a feminine spirit? I will try to give you an answer later. But for now, we see that wisdom, yeah, is a woman, Sophia. Okay. So much for the book of Proverbs. As you can see, the book of Proverbs just tell us how to live. Yeah? It's like, but we see that the wisdom inside of the book of Proverbs maybe is not that much of wisdom. Yeah, it's more circumstantial, as we said. Now, the second very interesting book of wisdom is called the Ecclesiastes, and the Ecclesiastes is the Greek name for this book. Yeah? And Ecclesiastes comes from ecclesia. And if any of you speak any Romance language, Italian, Spanish, you will know that church is called iglesia or ecclesia, yeah? Or église in French, asglesia in Catalan. Yeah? So ecclesia, what it means is a Greek word that basically just means a congregation of people. Yeah? And it could be a congregation of people, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a religious congregation. It can be a congregation of people working in the polis, in the Greek towns. Okay, and look at how it's a congregation of people doing something together. Look at how different this word is from the Northern European word for church. Yeah, we have church in English, kyrka in Swedish, kirke, no, in German, etc. All of these words come from another Greek word that is called Kyrios. Yeah? And it's the Lord. Lord. It's Lord. curious. And in Latin it would be dominus, yeah? Which has a totally different connotation. So look at, it's the same, we have the same religion, right, in Europe, more or less. We're all Christians, Protestants, whatever, but we relish the same God, no? But look at the difference in connotation. With the south of Europe, that we say ecclesia, it's something that we do together. And then in the north of Europe is shirka, which means a lord is telling you what to do. The connotation is very interesting, yeah, here. So this book is called Ecclesiastes. It's the congregation, and why? Because there is a preacher that tells us some of his thoughts. Yeah, there is a preacher there. We're going to meet a preacher, and he's going to tell us some of his thoughts. And what are the kind of thoughts that we have in Ecclesiastes? Well, they are much more depressing than Book of Proverbs. Yeah, in the Book of Proverbs, mainly, no, if you behave as the Proverbs say, then you may go to heaven. No, but here, look at how it begins. This is how the preacher begins. It says, "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Yes. And vanity here, I mean, you have different translations, but you could understand it as smoke. Yeah? Smoke. Like vapor, like mist. So he's telling us everything is mist. There is nothing sure in life. This is what he's telling us. There is nothing 100% sure. And here he continues, what has been will be again. So there's no possibility for change. Give up trying to be a good person, a better person. You will not change. That's what he's telling us, yeah? And so what has been done will be done again. Oh my goodness. Okay. A bit depressing. And then they sentence, this is a very famous sentence, at least in Spanish, there is nothing new under the sun. What do you think so far? It's quite depressing, right? So, and then I have another verse here. It says, for in much wisdom, the wisdom that we studied just now, is much grief. So he who is wise, is telling us, will suffer even more. And maybe we can agree with this verse every now and then, yeah? Sometimes it's difficult to know if being wise means being happier. Yeah. So maybe here there is actual wisdom, yeah? And then he says, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Oh. And here I have a picture of Caravaggio. I always try to have some sort of beautiful art. I love Caravaggio. Yeah? I always try to teach you something about this beautiful art. What's the point with Caravaggio? He is a master of the chiaroscuro. The chiaroscuro means high contrast painting. Yeah? High contrast. You can see here the very, very high contrast. Yeah? The light here illuminating his arm, Saint Jerome's arm, and the shadows. Yeah? He's a master at this. He was a Baroque painter. Yeah? And Velázquez, one of the Spanish most famous painters, he was very much inspired by Saint Jerome. Saint Jerome, by the way, you can see here the depiction of Caravaggio. It's a very, very human depiction. And this is why I chose this picture to accompany this text. Because you can see that Saint Jerome, in contrast with these images of saints that we have, that they are all light, no? Maybe you have seen some, especially in the early Middle Ages. Look how Caravaggio chooses to depict Saint Jerome, who, by the way, translated the Bible into Latin. Yeah? This is why it's very well known, Saint Jerome. He's a very old man. Look at him. He doesn't eat too much, yeah? And he's just very tired, I would say. And he has here his skull, yeah? A skull reminding him that death is always near. Yeah? So this is, I think it's a beautiful painting, and ties in very well with this. What is the book of Ecclesiastes trying to tell us? Don't forget that you are dust, yeah? And from ash to dash and dust to dust, yeah? So all of this wisdom that we taught you in the previous book of Proverbs, well, you should take it with a pinch of salt, you know, because, yeah, there are things that you cannot control in life, and for sure, you will end up as dust. Yeah? And seeing all of this, maybe you could even think that this is a bit skeptical, right? A bit cynic, even. Yeah. If you know these words, it means a bit arrogant. It's like, but just don't worry. Yeah. And maybe because they have actually, these verses maybe have actually been inspired by Greek philosophy. Yeah? And here is what I'm going to tell you, that this book, yeah.
So what about the guidance here? What has been done? What has been what has been done with the
It's trying to answer the book of Proverbs, right? It's trying to say, well, wait a second, yeah? It's not that easy. Yeah? No, it's a sort of self-answer inside of the Bible to say, it's not that easy. Wait a second. And what I want to say is that this book was, according to scholars, was maybe written in the Hellenistic age. Yeah? Hellenistic age is the age where Alexander the Great conquered all of these territories, so Mesopotamia, Egypt, Persia, even Afghanistan, and all of this. And why am I saying this? Because, as I said, this seems to me a bit cynic, a bit skeptical. Yeah. And if you know anything about Greek philosophy, you will know that after Socrates, yeah, there are roughly 4 schools of thought. Yeah. So you have the Stoics, which basically tell you, well, don't worry about the future, you are in control of your own life. And it's a very popular philosophy nowadays, right? The Stoic philosophy. And you see all of these podcasts and stuff. But you have the Stoics, you have the Epicureans that try to live the moment and take small pleasure in things. And then you have the other 2, yeah? which are skeptics, which say we cannot know with certainty anything, so why even bother? And it's a very lazy philosophy, in my opinion. And then we have the cynics. Yeah, the cynics. Cynics comes. The word cynic comes from the Greek word for dog. You say dog, hound. Yeah. Why does it come from dog? Because one of his major philosophers, maybe you have heard about his name, was Diogenes of Sinope. Diogenes of Sinope.
Excuse
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
did you say when the first parts of Bible were written, the creation and that?
You mean the Ecclesiastes?
Yeah, no, before that.
The book of Proverbs is a very long collection. It's centuries. It's hard to date.
But what about the creation of the world?
At the creation of the world, it was around the 5th century before Christ. It's around the time when the Jews are in Babylon. Yeah. And this is later.
300 before.
This is 300 before Christ, more or less. But this is what the scholars say. Yeah, maybe it was written in Hellenistic age, because you know how they do this. They basically look at the text and they try to see how many foreign words they can see. This is written in Hebrew, right? But there are many loan words from Persian, Aramaic, and depending on how many words they can see, they can point to other texts, in the same age, which they know they have dated. They can say, okay, but these words in Persian were being written around this time, 300 BC. So they know it's more or less. It's very hard to date, yeah. But so going back to this, we have a very cynical, very cynical text, yeah. And I wanted to touch upon Diogenes of Sinope. And there is a very famous anecdote of him, just to summarize his whole philosophy. Yeah? And it is that when he was living in Corinth, yeah, he was living in a barrel, inside of a barrel of wine. This was his home. And here's where, when I go back to the word cynic, he was living with his dogs. And he was living like a dog. And that's the point, yeah? That's the point, that the cynics, they despised everything, basically, or material possessions, etc. And this is where he was living. And one day, when he was living in Corinth, Alexander the Great, in his voyages, yeah, he came to Corinth, and they told him, you have to visit this famous philosopher, Diogenes of Sinope. He's sure going to give you some wisdom that you can use. And so Alexander the Great, most powerful man, maybe even in history, yeah, he goes to Diogenes and he says, Diogenes of Sinope, I'm Alexander the Great. Yeah? What do you want from me? And you know what Diogenes says? It says, just step a little bit to the right because you're blocking the sun for me. That's all he had to say to Alexander the Great. And that summarizes his philosophy, right? This is, by the way, an anecdote that Plutarch, another writer writing 200 years after Christ, more or less. So maybe, all of this is hard to really connect 100%. But yes, there is some Hellenistic. You could say that the book itself is very Jewish. Yes, very Jewish. But the overall style is Greek, and many scholars agree on this. Yeah? So, okay, we have been very cynical now, but do we have any actual reason for being cynical? I would say we have, because if you actually read the Bible, if you actually read the Old Testament, there are times when you can see I have written here, the arguably unjustified wrath of God. So we have a God, right, that supposedly is all wise and he knows what to do and he's omnipresent, omniscient. He knows what's right in every single moment in time. Yeah? But then there are moments when you read the Bible and say, but this guy, what is he doing? We don't really he's not Ahura Mazda. He's not the God of the Zoroastrians who was all good. Yeah? And I'm going to give you just two examples. And this is why maybe Ecclesiastes is telling us, be careful. Be careful with this guy. Okay? So one of the two, the first example is in 2 Samuel 6. This is very brutal. Basically, these guys and King David, they are carrying the Ark of the Covenant. And supposedly you're not allowed to touch it. Yeah? Because it's not for mortals. It's where Yahweh is where Jehovah lives. Yeah? So in one of these trips, one of the bulls trips. And so this guy is called Uzzah, this guy. He goes to help the bull. Yeah? And in order to do so, he just does like this. Yeah? Puts his hand on the ark just to help the bull. Well, what do you think Jehovah does? Just smites him with lightning. This evaporates him. Yeah? And so David, the King David, is there, and he's looking at this a little bit perplexed. He's like, what did this guy do? Why were you so tough on him? Yeah, no, but I mean, if you touch the ark, I mean, that's it, you're gone. Yeah, so be careful with this God. And number two, it's maybe the most brutal story in the Bible. It's 2 Kings 2:23-24. We have this prophet called Elisha. Okay. Elisha is one of the prophets, and he's bald, okay? Just like me. He's bald. And
what was his name?
Elisha, yeah, one of the prophets. And he's climbing, he's going up a hill, yeah? And there are some boys there, some boys and teenagers that are telling him, they are mocking him, yeah? They are telling him, go up, you're bald. Literally, this is what it says. It says, go up, you bald head, go up, you bald head. And you know what he does? He prays to Jehovah, and Jehovah responds and sends two bears that maul and kill all of the 42 boys. Two wolves, 42 boys, all gone. Okay, and this is in the Bible, and even Voltaire, the philosopher, mentions this, as an act of what's going on here, right? So, can we blame the Ecclesiastes, the book, for being a bit cynical, a bit skeptical, of God? It's like, at least the Bible takes criticism, and criticizes itself. They say, well, sometimes it's a bit weird what the way that God has to love us. Yeah? If this is love, I don't know. So then all of this, I think it beautifully condenses into what is the book of Job. And it's my beautiful book, my favorite book in the Bible, the book of Job. And this is a fascinating story. Yeah? So just to recap, we have a God, right, that is supposedly all good. He cares for us, he creates the world, and he does so with Sophia, Lady Wisdom. So he's a very wise king, like Solomon, no, that almost split a baby. And then we have that this wisdom has given us the book of Proverbs that tell us how to live happily, etc. Maybe we go to heaven. But then we also see that there are some dark aspects of Jehovah, okay? This culminates in the book of Job. Has any of you read the book of Job? Okay, the book of Job is a fascinating book because it's just a story. Yeah? It's a story, really. It's like a fairy tale, almost. Yeah? It's like a fairy tale. So what do we have here? And by the way, this book of Job, I think it was written also a little bit after the Babylonian captivity. So maybe 4th century before Christ, something like that. Yeah? So not 1,000 years before Christ, something. So we have, the beginning is very interesting. It's set almost as if it was a theatrical stage. Yeah? And we have God. So here is God. And we have a lot of angels around him, right? And we have God and Satan. The divinification, it's the divine symbolism for evil, yeah? And Satan doesn't mean anything else than the adversary. The adversary. That's what it means. It doesn't mean demon, yeah, or something like that. It just means the one who opposes God, okay? So this is Satan, but here you have a very basically Dantesque depiction of Satan, no, with wings and the horns. But okay, so they're discussing, right? And Satan tells him, look at this guy, Job. Job is a guy. Yeah? He's a guy living in Uruk, I think it was. Yeah, somewhere in Mesopotamia, I think. And it's this guy, yeah? It's a fictional guy. He says, look at him. He's a very good guy, right? And yes, Job, he is wealthy, he has sons and daughters, he loves his wife, and he preaches the Lord. Yeah? So he's a very good guy. And he does everything that the book of Proverbs tells him to do. Okay? So he's a very good Jew. And Satan tells God, I think that he's just doing all of this to please you, yeah? So that he can go to heaven, basically. And I'm sure that if you try him a little bit, yeah, I'm sure that if you're not good to him, this is what Satan tells God, if you're not good to him, he will stop loving you. He will stop praying to you, and he will say, I don't believe in you anymore. Yeah. And so God, he says, no, you're wrong, Satan. Job loves me because he really loves me. You know? He's not trying to work the system. Yeah. And he says, Satan, okay, let's put this to the test if you're up for it. Yeah? And so Satan tells God to start messing with Job. Yeah? And so the first thing that God does to prove Satan wrong is to kill his children and to kill all his cattle. Yeah? So Job wakes up one day and all his children are dead and his cattle too, and all sorts of calamities start coming to his life, yeah, and Job wonders, what is going on here? Well, anyway, I will preach to the Lord still, yeah. I will try to be a good Jew still, even when things are not going my way. And so God and Satan, they talk again, and God says, you see, Job still loves me. He's a good Jew, yeah. And Satan just says, that's because you haven't messed his life up enough. You have to go further. and God says, even further, is yeah. It's like, and God says, okay, I will leave it up to you. Yeah? Just don't kill him. That's what God tells Satan. So you can mess up with Job as much as you want, just don't kill him. And Satan does, okay, here we go. And then he starts, he basically obliterates his life. He's a poor man. He's sick. Also, the skin starts having rashes, and all of it is horrible, disgusting, yeah? And even his friends, Job's friends, this is Job and his wife, right? Job's friends, literally, they go up to him, they laugh at him, they point a finger at him, like, look at you, look what your God is doing to you. Or you're dumb, right? I mean, why are you doing? Oh, but Job is still there, and now, once his life is really upside down, his patience is starting to run out. Yeah. And so, Job, he starts to talk to God, and he asks him these questions like, how many wrongs and sins have I committed? Like, what are you doing to me? Show me my offenses and my sins. It's like, come on. I mean, I can take a little bit of your anger, the anger that we saw before, but not all of it. What are you doing with me? It's like, why do you hide your face and consider me your enemy? What has Job done wrong? Will you torment a wind-blown leaf? Will you chase after dry shaft? And so Job, I see him like in this picture right here, in this painting. It's a beautiful painting by John Martin. It's called Sadak in the Search of the Waters of Oblivion. It's one of the allegorical depictions of a feeling or of an idea, philosophical idea called the sublime. Yeah? The sublime is a very romantic idea. It's this idea of a beauty that is dangerous also. It's like the beauty that we feel when we're crossing the Alps, and at any moment, yeah, we're enjoying the views, but at any moment there can be a storm and takes us. Yeah. So this is the sublime here. And Job, it's like this guy right here trying to hold on for dear life, and he has all of these mountains and storms in front of him, and saying, "What are you doing with me?" And you know what God says? He says, will you torment a wind-blown leaf? Will you care about the leaf that is there in your garden and try to tarnish it? And why? No? And you know what God does? God gets very angry at Job, and basically he shows him that his power is infinite. Yeah? He tells him, look, you don't even answer to me, man. I mean, I can kill you with just a thought. Yeah? And so he shows him all of these hidden powers of the universe, and then Job just says, okay, I'm just a simple servant. Yeah? And then in the end, he says this, and basically God says, okay, nothing happened. And he doubles all of Job's riches, and God tells Satan, you know, I won. And this is the story of the book of Job. It's hard to swallow for people who actually believe, Jews and Christians, and this book is even in Islam. I haven't read the Quran, but I have been told by my Muslim friends that this book is even in the Quran, or at least the Prophet is in the Quran. What's the point with this, right? It's really hard to explain. But I'm going to give you a very interesting explanation that Carl Jung, you know Carl Jung, he was one of the fathers of psychoanalysis, yeah? Swiss psychologist, yeah? Friends with Freud and up to a point, and then he was very angry with Freud. He has a very, very interesting, I think it was a seminar that you can actually read in a book form. It's called The Response to Job. And Carl Jung, in all his psychoanalysis rhetoric, yeah, when he tries to explain this from he tries to understand what's going on here, and his answer is very interesting. First of all, we said that God was wise and all-knowing, and he knows what's going to happen in every point in time, so he's omnipresent, omniscient. Yeah, God is willing to partake into a game with the devil. Yeah. First of all, that's really bad. I mean, does that tell you that God is a moral being, or actually he's quite amoral, right? He doesn't know how to distinguish what is right from what is wrong. That is what we understand. I mean, if you're actually going to play a game with the devil and mess up someone's life, that's dangerous. Yeah. So, who does this remind us of? This God that does all these bad things to Job reminds us of the gods of the Greeks, for example, Zeus. Yeah? Zeus was not a moral standard for the Greeks. He was really bad. I mean, if you were to behave like Zeus, you would be a pedophile, you would be an assassin, right? I mean, it would be terrible. So So what Jung is telling us is that be careful here, God, Jehovah, yeah, because maybe people will get tired of you. Yeah? Maybe people will get tired of you. And so what Jung, he has a very interesting text and such, but basically in the end he says, at the end, God has to come face to face with his own actions. Yeah? He has been a very bad God in the Old Testament. He has to come face to face with his own actions. And you know what he says? He says, maybe God will have to redeem his sins at some point. Not humanity's sins, but his own sins. And here I have a beautiful painting by Rembrandt. It's called Supper at Emmaus. And what does this painting tell us? It's basically Jesus has died at the cross and then has resurrected. And there is a certain period of time where he is around and he visited several people. Yeah? And this is one of the visitations here. And this guy right here is having lunch or having dinner, and he sees a shadow, and look, this is Jesus. Yeah? And so what does Jung tell us? And this is Jung's opinion, but I really like it. He says that when the time for Christianity comes, it's not that Christ is redeeming our sins when he goes to the cross, but redeeming God's sins. Yeah? Because after Christ, Christ is really the one who says, God is love, God is love, God is love. But he has to mean it. Yeah? He has to mean it. He cannot go back to his own old ways. So this is an interesting take. This is Jung's take. Yeah? It's an interesting read. Very curious, the book of Job. Yeah? I'm going to recap what we have talked about, and then I will answer your question. So recap. So the wisdom literature. Yeah, we have the Proverbs. We saw how to live. We need to fear the Lord. We need to respect him because he's wiser than us. He knows better than us, and it's filled with aphorisms. In Ecclesiastes, we see that be careful because God has been a little bit of a bad God lately. Yeah? He has smitten Uzzah when he was with his bulls. He has killed 42 children, just to say the least. So be careful, be skeptical, vanity of vanities, yeah? And then one of the conclusions also is that you just do your own thing, yeah? Don't worry too much about what you cannot control. Cultivate your garden, which is also what Voltaire says at the end of his Candide. Yeah? And then number 3, we see the epitome of all of this brutality is written here in the book of Job. God enters into a wager with the devil somehow, a God that is all wisdom. And then there is unnecessary suffering. Yeah? But do you think that this is far-fetched? I mean, even if you're religious and very religious, you have the question is like, what do bad things happen to good people? Why is it? Yeah? Why is it? Human nature. But when these people try to relate it to a higher power, then they have these questions. It's like, but God is supposed to be all wise and all knowing. It's just the ways of the Lord. Well, you see very human episodes here, yeah? And so now I want to go back to what I said about Lady Wisdom in the epilogue, yeah, the eternal feminine. Now, why was wisdom feminine? Because I think that there should be a feminine component in the Bible. Otherwise, it wouldn't be human. Otherwise, it wouldn't appeal to anyone, really. And there is one more book of wisdom that I haven't mentioned. One more book that is very short. It's a poem that is called The Song of Songs. It's the Song of Songs. And it's a beautiful book also. And the Song of Songs is just a story also about 2 lovers. And it's very erotical. Very, very erotic. So it's a story of a very carnal love between 2 lovers that find themselves, and then they fall in love, but then they can't be together. So they are separated. But then they come together again and stay as long as possible. And as I say, it has beautiful verses like, there is one guy that says, how beautiful you are, my darling, or how beautiful your eyes are those. How handsome you are, my beloved, oh, how charming, and our bed is verdant. And it really is like this. And why is this wisdom? I ask, why is this also wisdom? If you want to know my opinion, I think that love has to play a fundamental role in any religion. Yeah? Love has to be there. But not only the ethereal love of a God for his people. Yeah? This is real love. Yeah? This is the real love between two lovers, between two young lovers that desire each other. Yeah? And so there is a feminine component here. Of course, there has to be a feminine component. Yeah? And maybe this is the reason why God has also a feminine component next to him when he creates the world. Because as I titled here, I call this the eternal feminine, in line with another person that I have already mentioned. It's called Goethe, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, the highest exponent of the German literature. If you have read Faust, do you know Faust? The story of Faust is a guy that sells his soul to the devil, yes? Well, first of all, Goethe starts Faust with a spin-off of the story of the Book of Job, because Satan tells God, look, I'm gonna corrupt Faust, yeah? And God says, no, you're not gonna be able to do that. Anyway, but then in the end, the very last verse of the play, Goethe tells us that the eternal feminine is always there for us. Yeah? Is always there for us. And this is a concept that he himself created, right? But I think that if we read him in depth, you can trace back the origins of this concept to the Lady Wisdom that we saw, yeah? To this feminine, very important feminine figure here in the Song of Songs. And not only that, but femininity, yeah? The feminine, the eternal feminine, plays a very important role for Catholics as well, yeah? In the form of the Mother Mary. Mother Mary is really the one that gives us love and that cares for us and that guides us, yeah? And she always is there like a mother. And here we have Michelangelo's Pietà. So even if the Christ is there after he has come down from the cross, you can see her beautiful, taking care of him, yeah? Taking care of him. So she's always there for us. And that's what I started talking in the beginning. She's a guide. She's there for us. She's taking care of us. Yeah? It's always almost like a mother. So my take about why does Sophia have to be feminine? It's because it's a mother. Yeah, it's a mother. It's a mother, and the love of a mother doesn't have any kind of comparison, right? And we even see this. We started with Dante also in Inferno. Okay. But then, and Virgil was guiding Dante in Inferno, but then when he comes to paradise, okay, he ascends Mount Purgatory, Virgil cannot go to paradise because he's not Christian. He was born. He died before Christ was born, right? And so he needs another guide when he's into paradise, and that is Beatrice, yeah? His beloved. The woman that died, he was very much in love with her, and she died when she was 25. And at the end of the Vita Nuova, one of the works of Dante, he says, I'm going to write about Beatrice what no one has written about any other woman in history. And this is why the comedy is so beautiful. Yeah? And Beatrice, the spirit of Beatrice here, guides Dante to paradise. Yeah? And I told you I'm going to finish with this. I told you that the love of a mother, the love of Sophia, let's say, doesn't have any comparison, and I can feel this very personally. You saw a picture of my daughter last time. That's my daughter now, and my wife. Yeah, the love of a mother is always there. Yeah, and yeah, this is also one post that this is how I started all of this writing, all of this introspection. It was a post in 2019 that I wrote talking about an answer to Ecclesiastes. So Ecclesiastes has told us that everything is dust, that everything is lost, is very skeptical, right? I say, well, not that fast. There are reasons to live. Yeah? There are good reasons to live. One of them is, of course, love. Yeah? So yeah, that more or less finishes our lecture.